Okay, guys, we're going to talk about Great Britain in the age of mass politics. We're going all the way up until the eve of World War I in 1914. A few things I want to remind you guys is to concentrate on the main themes, really take that into account, and understanding of each era, of each age. Okay, what is the main changes over time that we see? Okay, so in this time period, we're calling this the Victorian era. A few things I want to explain um, as we look through why did Great Britain not see revolutions in 1830 and 1848. It's because they have been on a path of evolution rather not revolution. And that means is that politically, the developments are more smooth over time because it's slowly evolving. It's gradual, right? Gradual reforms. Also, economic prosperity is coming with reforms too, and they're growing as a nation, so they're not seeing a lot of struggles within all of the classes. Maybe certain classes have certain things that they're demanding for, but overall, as a country, they are growing and they're actually listening to the needs and the cries of people and providing reforms in that direction. And so these gradual reforms are going to be built more and more off of the previous one. So a lot of times it's going to be like the new Parliament Act or the Reform Act of whatever year. And so it's really taking the original one and amending it more, adding more reforms to it. Okay, so it's called the Victorian era because of Queen Victoria, and she's going to reign from 37 to 1901. And during this time, they said, Britain is at the one of the most powerful states of history, but at the same time, they're very stable. Queen Victoria models what morality and propriety look like, and so as a monarch, right, even in a constitutional monarchy, she lived very frugally with her husband, and their lifestyles appeared and appealed to the middle classes. Okay, so they weren't living the extravagant lives like many other French kings, but Queen Victoria became the symbol of national unity, and through her, she is kind of showing an image of what it means to be above politics, not trying to be corrupted by it. Okay, so overall, though being in a constitutional monarchy, right, the parliament is very strong, and they're the ones who are passing all these reforms and acts. She doesn't have that much power compared to all the other kings and monarchs that live on the continent, but she was long lasting. Okay, and so this is where we can see throughout the 19th century. It's called the Victorian era, and the middle classes really saw Queen Victoria as a reflection of their own values. So they kind of felt like she represented them. Okay, all right. So very quickly, we talked about how one of the themes in the age of mass politics is the development of the political parties. Well, the Whigs and Tories have been around, but this is where people are going to see the parties to be a little bit more distinct through these leaders, and they're going to start aligning themselves to be either more liberal or more conservative. Okay, so from 1815 to 1865 is this time of realignment, and then we're going to hit 1871, which is after this time period. But Lord Palmerston is a Whig, and he's prime minister at that time, and he's going to be the dominant political figure, passing some reforms there. Okay, the Tory party, however, okay, is going to have a prime minister named Benjamin Disraeli. Okay, and the Tory party is now going to transform into the Conservative Party. So that changes, and so on the other side, you have the Whig Party, right? They were liberal, through a lot of the Reform Acts and stuff. William Gladstone is going to be the prime minister during that time, and so the Whig Party is now going to be transformed into the Liberal Party. Okay, so it's very clear, conservative, liberal. You don't really need to remember now because they just clearly follow their name. Then you have individuals like John Bright, and he's going to be a person that's supporting the liberals because he is a business owner. He's a manufacturer. He is anti-corn laws, right? He's looking for free markets, and he's contributing significantly to developing the Liberal Party. And this is how we're talking about aligning yourself with a political party. Where do you favor, right? And in the age of mass politics, you are participating, and the government is actually valuing people's opinions. All right, so after 1865, we're going to see that democracy is going to expand under Disraeli and Gladstone, and we're going to go over each of their eras. Okay, so under Disraeli, what was he about? Well, he's part of the Conservative Party, and so he's looking at a lot of big picture foreign policy. Okay, aggressive foreign policy. The British Empire at this point is the strongest empire, right? We're going to go into imperialism very, very soon, and we're going to see that the British Empire is looking to expand itself, establishing more colonies, practicing imperialism. Okay, and so as far as how does Disraeli feel towards reforms, the key word is that he is reluctant. Okay, reluctant. So though reluctant, right, we're going to see that reforms are still going to happen because we saw that it's not about revolution with big changes in government, but through evolution. Okay, so he wrote a novel called Sybil in 1845, and as much as he was reluctant to really support democratic reforms and open up government in that way, he had sympathy for the working class, according to his novel. Also, after John Stuart Mill wrote On Liberty in 1859, this is where he began to realize maybe we need to get more people involved in democracy, and so this will come. We have the Reform Bill. Okay, so we have different acts that have been passed. Right, Reform Bill of 1832, and this is building off of that one. Okay, and it's called the Leap in the Dark because people weren't really sure of whether this was the best decision to make, but they did this in order to appeal to the working class. So expanding the Reform Bill of 1832, the main thing is that the seats in Parliament are going to be kind of redistributed, reconfigured of how many seats are going to which party and which social class so that representation is more equal. Okay, representation is more equal, and specifically for the working class people, they're looking at in the House of Commons. Okay, so the House of Commons, House of Lords, right, two bicameral houses. In addition to seats in Parliament and representation, we mentioned before the rotten boroughs, right? And so representation, kind of during the Industrial Revolution, population would increase in these small towns that become these industrial cities, and then all these other small rural provinces and counties, they don't really have that many people anymore, and they're still getting that many representative seats. So what's going to happen? They're going to change this and follow where the population is. Okay, and so from this, we're going to see increased suffrage, where almost all men over 21, the age of 21, who lived in urban cities are going to be given the right to vote. Okay, does this mean this universal suffrage? No. So even by 1867, Great Britain has not reached universal suffrage. However, the number of men is going to double. Okay, of who could vote. So I think it's around like 3 million at this time now. Okay, what else happens? The government, through the Reform Bill, is going to reduce the regulation on trade and labor unions. Okay, so unions are okay in 1875, and then also what people care about is sanitation, living conditions, working conditions. Okay, so that's Benjamin Disraeli. He is actually Jewish, as you can see from his last name, Israel. Only Jewish prime minister for Great Britain. Okay, then we have Gladstone that comes after him, and so as much as Disraeli was of the Conservative Party, right? He was a Tory. Gladstone is a Whig. He's going to be one of the most important liberal figures in 19th century England. We got to know him. Okay, we have to see what is he about, right? So his policies. He's supporting Irish Home Rule. He wants to grant the Irish people their independence, right? He believes that is deserving for them. Also, the economic policy, he wants to open up free trade. Okay, also how he's going to run and support businesses domestically. Okay, that too. Also, he wants to extend democratic principles and go beyond just a constitutional monarchy and providing more suffrage to more people. And at the same time, he's anti-imperialism. Okay, so very different from Disraeli. What would he accomplish during his time in power? He will abolish compulsory taxes, and so you are no longer required to pay taxes to the Church of England, and that's actually going to appeal to a lot of Catholics, especially the Irish people, because the Church of England is Anglican, right? They're Protestant, and so Catholics don't want to feel like they're giving money to a religion they don't follow. Also, he's going to institute the secret ballot. This is going to happen in 1872. So just how you guys vote for your class president and class cabinet and all that kind of stuff, okay, you don't put your name on the actual ballot, right? It's a secret of who you vote for. So it does not link the voter to their actual vote, and so you don't get to say like, oh, like I saw you voted for this person, how could you, right? And they start putting a lot of intimidation in you. They start putting a lot of like bribery out there, saying like, why would you do that? If you do that, I'm gonna treat you a certain way. So this is also called the Australian Ballot Act because Australia did this first in 1850. But basically, a secret ballot is going to be used as far as when people vote in elections. Okay. Change over time. Note. Development. The secret ballot was a demand from the Chartists. We talked about the Chartists, right, in 1838, back in Industrial Revolution. Okay, so the Chartists, the People's Charter. Okay, this is one of their demands. Now we're going to actually see it happen in 1872. All right. In addition, what are the reforms? We're going to see that he's going to change how civil servants are going to be hired. Okay, so if you work for the government, you are considered to be a civil servant. What does that mean? Well, any government job, right? Because you're serving the public, police officers, okay, county accountants, everything, okay. He's going to require a competitive exam for people to apply for government positions, not just handed out to whoever they connect with, okay. And then we're going to see in 1884 is going to be the main Reform Act, okay, also known as the Representation of the People Act. So as you can imagine, what's going to happen, even more suffrage is going to come to adult males, especially in the counties where those boroughs, those rotten boroughs, right, were no longer taking on the vote. So then the boroughs that have the vote, the whole county now is given the vote. So now we're going to see what is the result of this is 2 million agricultural voters are going to be added to the total voting population. And so Britain is now a step closer to universal male suffrage, once again, but not completely. Okay? All right, new reforms. New groups and new reforms. So during the 1880s and 1890s, we're going to see new groups emerge, and they're looking to extend democracy further. They're going to see they want to evolve democracy even more, so that a lot of these topics can be, in the hands of the people. They are participating in government. So women's suffrage, anti-imperialism, socialists, and anti-nationalists. These types of groups are advocating for more democratic change and reform. One group is called the Fabian Society. They are probably one of the most popular ones because they were socialists. Okay, so they believed in Marxism, but they were what we call revisionists. We're going to get into how socialism is going to develop during the 19th century, but the Fabian Society was more advanced, and they wanted to have a political democracy, but economic socialism. Okay, so they're revising how Marxism actually works. And then we have the Independent Labor Party, and you have Keir Hardie, who is the leading this party. And they're saying that instead of being affiliated and aligned with the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party, you can be in this third party, it's called the Independent. Okay, and we do too. We have an independent party. But it's such a small population in the U.S. Okay, but in '93, this is where Hardie wanted to unite trade unionists, those who want to be part of a labor union, socialists, and those that just basically didn't feel like they want to take a side. They could join the independent party so they can meet their needs. Okay, by 1905, we're going to see going into World War I, 1914, and into the early 20s, okay, the Liberal Party is going to push and advance a lot of political and economic policies. Okay, so the first one is going to be the Parliament Act of 1911. This is going to be a huge political reform. Okay, so how will this change? Well, the Liberal Party is going to be pushing for a lot of laws. One is Parliament Act 1911, stating that the House of Commons is going to be now the center of national power, and the House of Lords is going to be reduced in their power. Okay, so the House of Commons is now more powerful, and so members are going to be serving on a shorter rotation. Okay, Parliament members are elected for a shorter rotation, which means that more people can participate in who they elect. And then we're going to see also other reforms, like the social welfare state is going to be established before World War I. So we talked about social welfare and how that's something that people have been demanding. Citizens want to have a decent standard of living. Citizens are looking for certain rights and treatment. And so what's happening in the social welfare state? Well, unions are allowed to strike. That's one thing. Another thing is that they are requiring the government to provide insurance for workers if they get injured, right? If something happens to them, they get sick, the government is there to take care of them. Okay, unemployment and retirement pensions. We talked about this through Bismarck. So Bismarck in Germany was the first, and then following we have Great Britain's introducing the welfare state. Also, compulsory school education, requiring all children from 4 or 5 to 13 to require to get an education, and so that comes with taxes. Okay, so the wealthy is now going to be taxed more, and from those tax money, that's how you can pay for the welfare state, and that's where we are today, right? People are still paying taxes. I'm paying taxes for people on welfare. I don't really need to say what I believe, but the point is, many people disagree that they should be paying for others, and that's kind of how democracy works, right? It's what people are demanding for, what type of legislation is being passed, so on and so forth, and that's how they spend taxpayer money. Okay, Representation of the People Act of 1918. This is where all men are going to gain suffrage. Okay, so it's fine at the end of World War I, which we'll get to, right, is we're going to see that finally Britain has achieved universal male suffrage, male being the key word. What about women? Well, women at the end of World War I are actually going to gain suffrage as well, except that they have to be at a minimum age of 30 years old. Okay, before this, before the Representation Act, People Act of 1918, men were required to have certain qualifications, mainly economic. Mainly, they had to be a landowner, okay, a property owner, or you had to be of having a certain job, certain income, in order for them to be qualified whether they are to vote. I mean, if you're just a random guy owns no property, should you care, or why should you have a say in government? That was the whole debate for a long time. Okay, so women, almost done here, got 2 more slides. Women are looking for new rights reforms. Initially, it started from marriage and property laws that discriminated against females, but the reason why marriage and property laws was kind of what they were focused on is because as far as marriage, men were able to divorce women for committing adultery, but women could not divorce men. So the women did not have the right. Women did not have the right if they were being abused, if whether it's physically, emotionally, verbally, if husbands were harsh, right, or if they were neglecting their wives, they couldn't divorce them. They didn't have that right. Okay, they just had to take it. Also, for property, they could not inherit property unless there was absolutely no male heir. They just had no opportunity to. So if there is a male heir, they don't get anything. Okay? All right. In the 1890s, we're going to see that there's going to be women's rights activists. And they come down to the conclusion that the only way they can see actually a solution to these problems is through gaining suffrage. Okay? These activists realize men obviously are not protecting women. They are not doing a good job in providing rights for women. And so many believe that, hey, you know what, if these females begin to obtain rights, possibly then they can kind of tip the scale and balance out a lot of the masculinity in politics, and hopefully they'll bring positive changes. Okay, so those that were supporting women's suffrage are going to be called the suffragettes, and mainly are from the middle class. Why the middle class? Well, They're the ones who, throughout the Industrial Revolution, the 1800s, they are actually gaining education, right? They don't have to go to work in the factories. They can go get an education, and they have been exposed to a lot of literary works, right? Like John Stuart Mill on Liberty, of supporting feminist rights. Okay, many middle class families had servants, and so then they don't have to really take care of home stuff, and they're more free in time. What do? Well, they're getting involved and being more active, right, in this movement. And so the contrast is the middle class is participating, and the working class women are as well, except they're not working together. Okay, so that's really key. They're not working together because the working class women distrusted the middle class. Their lifestyles are very different, and so they could not actually come together and understanding and working, even though they have the same interests, but their lifestyles are different. So they're kind of looking for women's rights through a different lens of how they see things. So they're going to do it independently. Their lifestyles don't show overlap, even though they're trying to achieve the same goal, which is women's suffrage. Okay, some examples of those who are fighting and pushing for women's rights. There's a bug on my screen. All right. Millicent Garrett Fawcett is the leader of the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, NUS. What do they demand? Okay, so the NUS demanded that Parliament is going to give female suffrage, and by influencing them over time, they played a role in a lot of conferences. Leading up into when they finally can gain complete suffrage. Okay, so this is after World War I, after the Representation Bill 1918. Furthermore, we have those that were not working with Parliament and demanding from Parliament, but those that were taking violence. Okay, so you have militant suffragettes. Emmeline Pankhurst would lead the Women's Social and Political Union, frustrated with Parliament by not giving the females a vote, even though women in Finland, women in Norway, okay, before World War I, they have the vote, okay, they have suffrage. But in Great Britain, they're more developed, they're more advanced. Why don't they have it? And they're upset with that. So Pankhurst founded the Women's Social and Political Union, and founded it on militant principles, violence, okay? And so violent activities such as destroying railroad stations, destroying store windows, and even chaining themselves to the gates of Parliament in order to protest in a lot of these demonstrations, okay? So a lot of the things that we can see in today's protests are even happening because of suffrage from before. Many women who are protesting now are going to be arrested, thrown in jail, okay, and it's going to be a huge issue, conspiracy, as far as what happens of treatment of women in jail. Women are going to be seen as, oh, they're being abused, and then they shouldn't be abused. The public feels like they want to support the women because they should not be abused, but women are actually kind of like refusing to eat, and now guards are force feeding them. A lot of different examples of how women are trying to get attention, the public's attention, of how to really gain more support. Okay. Then you have Emily Davidson. Okay, she actually performed a militant act, maybe not a violent act, but more of a militant act in throwing herself out there. She jumped in front of the king's horse at a derby in 1913, and she committed suicide, and she did it for the sake of getting attention, so that people would recognize that women are trying to gain suffrage. Okay, so we talked about how the Representation of People Act 1918 gave women the vote who were over the age of 30. Okay, and partially we're going to see in World War I, women are actually going to be a critical contributor to the war, but it's not until 1928 where suffrage is given to women 21 and up. Okay, so that's where the new final change is. Okay, last slide, the Irish question. Okay, we talked about how in 1848, okay, There were many other movements that had a lot of nationalist ideals. Young Ireland, Irish had their own, and they felt in the same way. They want to have home rule. Okay, the Irish question is going to be the most recurring and serious problem. What are we going to do with Ireland? They want independence. Should we give it to them? Don't really want to, but they're demanding so. What happens if there's revolts? Well, what do we do? Okay, so Gladstone and Charles Parnell. Charles Parnell is a parliament member. He's Irish, right? But he's in parliament, and he's going to help lead British support for Irish home rule, right? So Ireland is, or the Irish people are demanding for independence, self-determination, self-government. Overall, Gladstone and Charles Parnell are unsuccessful because the current party during that time in Parliament, right, was a Conservative Party, and they were the majority in power, and they did not want to give Ireland home rule, the Irish home rule. So another reason, besides the Conservative Party, is Ulster. Ulster is a province in Northern Ireland, okay, and so there are a lot of Protestant counties in the north, or the rest of Ireland's more Catholic, and they did not want Irish home rule because they started to enjoy the economic growth of being affiliated with Great Britain, and so the people that live in Ulster are called the Ulsterites, and so they supported the British Parliament, the British opinion to not be separated. Eventually, at the dawn of World War I, the Irish Home Rule Act is going to be passed, and the House of Commons and Lords are okaying it, but the Protestants did not actually want this in the North. Okay, and because World War I breaks out, how they actually are going to give Ireland its own home rule, they are going to wait until after. So they draft it at the beginning, but not until after the war is when they actually are going to implement it. Okay, so because people are still looking for home rule, there's going to be a rebellion that breaks out in 1916. They're going to fight for independence, but the British troops in the middle of World War I, right, are actually going to crush it. And finally, in 1922 is when Ireland will gain its independence, but Northern Ireland is going to be still part of the British Empire, as you can see in that map picture. Okay, all right, great. We're moving along, and remember, your test is coming up, and I hope you guys have been studying for the AP test. Review, push hard in last day of spring break. We got about, I don't know, like 35 days left. Okay.